Hi, Masuma.
Hi, Bob.
How are you?
Fine, thank you. I'm good.
Good. Let me introduce us. I'm Robert Wright of Blogging Heads TV, and this is an episode of Worldwise. You're Masuma Ibrahimi, and you are in Afghanistan, in Kabul, Afghanistan, right?
Yes, I'm living in Kabul.
And you're general director of the Afghan Cultural House, and you've also been involved in social media, and I want to talk about those things. But first, I'd like to
excuse me, I interrupt you, but I don't have clearly your voice. Can you repeat your question again?
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. We should say to people that we're communicating by phone, and the phone coverage isn't perfect, so we'll ask viewers to bear with us. But can you tell us a little bit about your own story? I gather that your family left Afghanistan during the 1980s, during the war that followed the Soviet invasion, and you spent your childhood in Iran, and then you returned in 2003 to Afghanistan after the American invasion of Afghanistan following 9/11. Is that right?
Yes. Actually, I was born in 1981, and my family just went to Iran when I had 1 year old. And I grown up in Iran. I finished my school and university in Iran, and then I came back to Afghanistan myself in 2003. My parents living in Iran now, but I'm here in Kabul.
Okay. And what were things like in Afghanistan when you got there in 2003?
I haven't any idea what Afghanistan should be like, but my father, when he left Afghanistan, he had, lots of bad memories about Afghanistan, and his idea was I couldn't live in Kabul or in Afghanistan because of situation, war, and other things. But when I came here, I thought that it is my home, and I feel it's like home, and I decided to be in Kabul and doing something, here.
Okay, so it was safe when you got there in 2003. Kabul was a safe place to live, and it was.
Yes, it was my.
Did you like it better than Iran?
The Iran situation is very different from Afghanistan, and the situation of refugees, actually Afghan refugees that living there, it's very, very different. Because all of the people, Afghan people who living in Iran, they count as illegal immigrant after maybe 20 years, 30 years. Some people just born there and, they grown up there, but the government rules, the Iran rules, didn't allow them to live as a citizen in Iran. And it was very hard for getting a job, for having education, and it's very tough living as an Afghan refugee in Iran, and it's not comparable. When I came to Afghanistan, the situation as well was very hard because just the war was finished, and there wasn't any lots of facilities for living, but as a citizen, as an Afghan citizen, I could live, work, and study here. But in Iran, the situation was very hard for Afghan people.
Mm-hmm. So you were glad that you had gone to Afghanistan in 2003 once you got there and settled in? The situation
Yes, exactly.
was basically good.
Yes, exactly, because the situation of Iran up to now, it's very hard for families to living there, and because they couldn't get any job, all of the people who working in Iran, they don't register as a legal, people that working professionals, and all of them count as illegal immigrant.
Mm-hmm. So, from your point of view, Kabul was a better place to live than it would have been presumably before, 4 or 5 years earlier when the Taliban was still running Kabul.
I don't much have information, the experience of living during the Taliban. I can't say if it was better or worse, but, I have lots of friends that they lived during the Taliban, and they said that it was a horrible experience for them.
And was it bad for both men and women, or is it?
Yes, exactly. There wasn't any difference between men and women, because the women, didn't allow to go outside of home or work or having education. But also for men, the situation was very hard, because the government just said how they should look like, how they should work, and all things is controlled by the Taliban, because they said, okay, this time is all people should go to mosque, this time all people should have all things controlled by the Taliban, and it wasn't any freedom for them, free of speech or having access to media and all of things. I think the situation was hard for women, but the women was part of the families, and the difficulties is just transferred to men as well.
Okay, so your sense is that most people in Kabul were happy that the Americans had come and chased the Taliban out of Kabul?
All of the people in Afghanistan, most of the people in Afghanistan are happy that the Taliban just, fall, and they are not much, in the government or in power in Afghanistan. I can say that the most people are happy with that.
You can't say that most people are happy, or
I can say it's all people in Afghanistan are happy that Taliban lose the power here, and they are very concerned about if they are coming back in power in Afghanistan. They have lots of worries about that.
Mm-hmm. And I guess those worries have grown since 2003. I mean, tell us how things have changed since 2003.
Actually, in 2001, when I came here in 2003, the hope was very high, for people, for women, actually. For all Afghan people, the hope was very high. And unfortunately, on that time, the people thought that the Taliban, they just gone forever. After a while, in some part of Afghanistan, there was Taliban that people thought that it's supported by neighbors like Pakistan, sometimes by Iran, and they just, rise again in some provinces. And 2 days, in recent years, it was very hard for people because they think that Taliban get more, they are becoming more powerful, and the government just start to, talking with them and, about bringing them and sharing the power with them. And, most of the people in Afghanistan are not happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about ordinary people, not politicians. About people that I met, not maybe there is some people that are okay with the process and the, peace process that they call that. But people that I met and, I know them, they are not happy with this situation.
Mm-hmm. And are there? Does it depend partly on ethnic group? I mean, are most of the people in Kabul Pashtun?
I'm not sure about that, because there's lots of, diversity here in Kabul. There's Hazaras people, Tajiks, and Pashtun. There's no, there's no, official number how many Pashtun or how many Hazara or how many Tajik or other ethnics there are in Kabul. But, there is lots of, maybe 30 years ago, we could say that majority number of people are, for example, Pashtun or Tajik. But now I'm not sure about the number because there's lots of different ethnic living here in Kabul.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you mentioned Pakistan. Is the feeling among these people who are worried about the Taliban that Pakistan is part of the problem?
Exactly, because everything that we hear from the media inside Afghanistan, every people that they are deciding to have a suicide bombing here in Kabul or provinces, sometimes that they captured by the police. Most of them are not Afghan people. Most of them are Pakistani people or some Afghan people that just, lived or grown up in Pakistan. And it's not, we couldn't ignore that because most of them are, Pakistanis people.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so is there, the American troops are leaving.
Yes.
And so is that's a source of concern?
Exactly. The big concern for civil society in Afghanistan, actually for women here in Afghanistan, is international community just pulling out from Afghanistan. They are very worried about that because the government during the 10 or 11 years ago, they didn't show that they could, protect the, democracy that just started in Afghanistan. And the government showed that they are not very serious about the, stopping Taliban or protecting democracy. It's a big concern for all people in Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm. And so what is the attitude toward the Afghan government there? Among the people. I mean, in the American media, we read a lot about corruption in the government and nepotism and so on. Is the Karzai government very, very popular there?
They are not popular inside people. I'm in capital, but also in provinces. In some provinces, the government, offices doesn't work anymore. The people doesn't trust anymore them, and they just, for every problem they have, they go to elders, to mullahs that they decided about their problems. But here also in Kabul, the corruption is a very serious problem here because the corruption is kind of systematic here. It's not just in ministries or in government. There's just a few people. It's kind of systematic corruption. If you want to do anything with the government, sometimes it's impossible. You have to pay money for something that is your right, and sometimes it's the people they are more rich and they have power. They just doing against law, and no one can do anything about that.
Okay. I mean, are you? I mean, first of all, do you think there's a difference of opinion in the rural areas?
People in rural areas, they had trust. They still have some hope to the government, but the corruption system and the way that they working with the kind of peace process with Taliban, it's make them concerned about the situation. It's in capital, in Kabul and big cities, people having access to media, but in provinces they don't have access to electricity, internet, media much, and they just keeping their hopes that the government can do something for them, but the hope is decreasing.
Okay. Now, where you are there any signs yet of the Taliban gaining influence? I mean, or do you feel that in Kabul, things remain the same for the time being?
You mean if we seen every sign of Taliban coming to power, or
right, or you're right, or even just causing more trouble?
Yes.
Creating more chaos.
Yeah. For example, I'm from Bamiyan. It's a central part of Afghanistan, and it's almost 6 hours or more from Kabul by car. And last year and the year before that, we traveled there, easily. But this year we couldn't go there because there's lots of people that just the car stopped in the road by Taliban, and some people killed during previous months, some students and ordinary people. Before that, the Taliban claimed that they just they fighting with foreign people, foreign armies. And also they are fighting with the government because they also because they said that they allow the foreign people come to Afghanistan. But this year we had lots of students and ordinary people that killed or kidnapped by the Taliban in around the Kabul, and it shows that the security situation it's getting worse, and the government control also it's not good enough to protect the people.
And do you think there has been some withdrawal of American troops already? I think 30,000 or so that had been part of the surge earlier in the Obama administration. Do you think that the growing security problem in Kabul is? Do people there think it's because the American troops are withdrawing, or is it the case that even with the American troops there, the situation is just getting worse and worse?
American, the America's army that getting out of Afghanistan is just, raise hope for Taliban, because they think and they kind of sure that the National Army of Afghanistan is not much strong. And as you know and heard in the news, there's lots of people, Taliban people, that just get in the army as a soldier. And it's the international community army that pulling out of Afghanistan, it's increase insecurity in Afghanistan. Also because the police and national army in Afghanistan is not so strong, and sometimes some of them have relationship with Taliban. It's the security situation is getting worse. It's not just because the international community pulling out of Afghanistan, and also because the government hasn't enough power in police and army to protect people.
Right. So is there I mean, do you think even if the Americans stayed forever, do you think that that would ever improve?
No, because we know that it's impossible to, and it's not it's not right, because Afghan people should protect their country, should improve themselves and the country and help people. Most of the people that talking about these issues in Afghanistan, they says that the government and democracy and police and army, everything, civil society in Afghanistan is very weak. 10 years or 11 years is not much time to be enough strong to, keep the situation calm and peaceful. We think that we need more time. Afghan people, Afghan citizens, the government, and the civil society need more time to be independent. And also is not just the government and civil society, because you can see in other countries that if international community watching closely, for example, human rights, the peace process in every country, if they are watching closely, the election, everything, in every country, it's rise the hope that the situation getting better. But if they just forget a country or a community in every place of the world, there's lots of, people or politicians that they want to take advantage of this situation.
Mm-hmm. So what is your hope? I mean, what are you hoping will happen if the security situation was getting worse even with the Americans there, and if now even the Americans are starting to leave, what are you hoping will happen?
I have a little hope, that there is just one hope for me, and it's the people of Afghanistan. The young generation of Afghanistan, the young politician people that they just come to parliament, or they are working with the government and army. It's a little hope for them to keep working on Afghanistan situation. For example, the moment situation, we have lots of women activists that they are working very hard, but the number of them it's not large enough, and they haven't much facilities, financial resources, and knowledge to keep working on them. It's just civil society in Afghanistan, young politicians, and Afghan people is kept me hope to doing something for this situation.
Okay, and the civil society is somewhat larger and better established than it was 10 years ago, right? So in that sense, there could be more resistance to a Taliban takeover, and certainly, it's much civil society is much better developed, I guess, than it was 20, 30 years ago, right? And then there's also the technology, the internet and so on, that might complicate the Taliban's attempt to control everything, right? So is there hope that the environment, it's now it's harder for the Taliban to assert control now than it was when they first asserted control?
Exactly, because people in 20 years ago, when the Taliban came to Afghanistan, they hadn't much resources for communicating with the rest of the world and report what's going on in Afghanistan. And also people in Afghanistan, the number, the percentage of people going to school, women who working with, government and other, other parts of the, business and all things, it's increasing. And I think the point that I want to say that it's very hard for Taliban to if they come to power, it's very hard for them to do the same that they did in past. But I'm saying that the situation here in Afghanistan could be better, during these 11 years, and also working and, lots of financial resources that came to Afghanistan. We expected more from government and also civil society and international community than, being back a part of Taliban or whole of that. I'm not sure if I gave you a,
yeah. So that leads
answer about your question.
Yeah.
If not,
no.
you
That
can, ask more about it.
Okay. So can you give us a little more detail about how the kind of resistance the Taliban might encounter now by virtue of civil society and technology? I mean, so for example, would people organize demonstrations on Facebook, or would they use blogs to express views that dissented from the Taliban's views, or what would you hope would happen if the Taliban tried to again take over Kabul?
I think social media and internet is a big chance as other countries in Afghanistan to communicate with themselves, between themselves, Afghan people, and also communicate with outside of Afghanistan. For example, nowadays there's lots of activities that going on in Facebook about Afghanistan. There's lots of demonstration, gathering, events that organize inside the Facebook, and people joining them, and they come, for example, to the street for demonstration, and then most of the people, they don't know each other in real world, but they using the Facebook, Twitter, social media, and internet to raise their voice. And I think it's a big chance for them if the Taliban also rise again and come to power. If they could, sometimes it's about filtering and limitation of access to internet. But I think it's impossible to stop, people of using internet and communicate with each other through the internet.
You think they couldn't stop it entirely?
Yes, I mean that they couldn't stop it entirely, exactly.
And people can use cell phones to text and things like that, and even without the internet. So what kinds of are there things that the international community could do now to make it more likely that there could be this kind of resistance if the Taliban comes to Kabul again? I mean, if we accept that the American troops are going to withdraw, but they won't all be gone right away, what kinds of things in the meanwhile could the international community do to prepare you better for the threat of the Taliban?
Yes, exactly. The security situation in Afghanistan, and also the international community, military here in Afghanistan, it's just a part of everything that we expect from international community. It's all the time there is another part. I think helping to Afghanistan for having a strong economic. I'm not talking about giving money to government or people in Afghanistan. They can give scholarship, helping like kind of technology and knowledge to help Afghan people to stand on their foot. But also I'm it kind of communication between civil society and international human rights organization and other international organization, because it's very important in some situation that Afghan people have access to international community, NGOs, and civil society in Afghanistan having access outside of Afghanistan to express their ideas and saying the stories and everything that's going on here in Afghanistan. It's a very big, it's a very big help in absence of international community in Afghanistan, and also give opportunity to young generation for getting education outside of Afghanistan, to getting knowledge, to sharing the experience. I think there's lots of countries that they just passed not like Afghanistan situation, but it's quite similar because of security, and other problems that they are now we have in Afghanistan. There's lots of countries that they had that and they passed, and I think the experience of them and the knowing that how they could overcome to these difficulties in their countries is very important for Afghan people. They don't need to have the same experience. They can use other countries' experience and they can help us to overcome this situation.
And do you think the example of some of the Arab countries in the Arab Spring, I mean, beginning with Tunisia, Egypt, and so on, does that also make it more likely that the people would resist Taliban rule?
I couldn't, the situation between Arab countries and Afghanistan is quite, I think it's quite different, because in most of the Arab countries there is a dictator that just had all of the power, but in Afghanistan, our situation here it's more complicated than the Arab, because there was just one person that have all the power. But in Afghanistan, there is a systematic corruption and the narcotic problem here that, people, the mafias of, it's quite different. But I think, I'm not sure about that. For example, there's lots of, there's lots of crime that happened in Afghanistan during 30 years, and there's lots of victims here that they felt that they don't have access to any justice system here, because most of the people that was involved in civil war in Afghanistan are now in the power. And I think there's lots of countries that they had the same experience as Afghanistan, because the war, civil war or all kind of war is finished, and the victim expected the government the government and international community to punish the people that made the crime. But it didn't happen in Afghanistan, and people, it gave the message to victims and also to criminals war that they could do it again. And the victim that they couldn't have any access to justice system. I think it's a big, it's not because there's lots of other problems here, but also it's a problem here that I think international community and other countries that they had this problem, how they overcome on that, how they the justice system, passed this kind. If the president carried several, I think, years ago, he just, it's kind of public. I'm not sure about the exact word for in English. Public forgiveness. It's that all people is forgiven. They made a law that
amnesty. Yeah, amnesty.
I'm not sure about the word. I mean, the President Kaiser gave, a law that all people that just forgiven, that made any crime, and we should pass that, and we should go forward to the future. But it's not the idea of victims in Afghanistan. They want to, people coming to court, and if they getting punished, at least they known as a criminal war.
Okay.
I mean, this experience also could share with, by other countries and other societies that they just passed, how they overcome on that, and how they could after that living together, because it's not just, all of that people also a part of Afghanistan. We can, kill off all of them and say, okay, the problem was solved.
Okay. Can you give us an example of how you are using media, whether blogging or Facebook or whatever, how you and people are using them to be involved in politics or express your views or whatever?
People like me and my friend, we just, getting our, our ideas from the media and the society. For example, if the, suicide bombing happened in Kabul and other provinces, and the media cover that, me as a blogger, just, as an Afghan woman, I have a reaction about that, and I give my idea in the Facebook, Twitter, and also in my blog. It's all things that happen in Afghanistan. For example, we had a winner in Olympic of London that lots of bloggers just start. I mean, every subject that come in the media and people are interested on that, we just start to talking about that. And sometimes in the Facebook and blog and other social media, there's lots of different ideas about that. For example, in the recent day, we had lots of demonstration about the person who made some movies about Prophet Muhammad and Islam. And there's lots of, you just found in the media that there's lots of protests happen in Kabul and other provinces. But in social media, it's quite different, because people talking about that. Okay, if the person, made this film, there's lots of people asking why you are, you are want to punish a nation for that, the conversation between the, in media and the social media is quite different. Some people approving, okay, the United States government should, stop this person.
But are you saying that people who were communicating on blogs and social media, many of them understood that the United States government doesn't control movies, so that really that movie about Muhammad was not an expression of American policy or of the American people broadly? Was that understood by people who were on social media?
Not all of them, but I mean, part of people in social media, in the Facebook, they just discussing about that, and I think it is a good sign, because people talking and making, they reason, they give their reason why they think this, this way. And there's some of people that say, okay, the government, the U.S. government should stop these people for making this kind of movie. But a part of them, I mean, the kind of discussion happen in the Facebook without any, because in Afghanistan people are so sensitive about religious and they are very conservative about that. But in the social media, they just have word, and they have to use the word to convince other people, okay, that's my idea is right or your idea is wrong. And I think it's a good sign, because it's also this kind of conversation inside the social media also come out in the families, in workplace, in the street, and all people just start talking about that. But in media, in newspaper and television and radio, you just heard about, okay, the demonstration just happened in Kabul, and people getting this message that all people in Afghanistan are agree that they haven't going to a street and condemning the United States and people.
Do you see signs that this online discussion is actually spreading, is actually increasing the number of people in Afghanistan who understand the situation in America and understand that the American government doesn't control movies here?
Yes, because the number of people using the internet in Afghanistan, the last number was 3% of whole population of Afghanistan having access to internet. It's not a large number, but the people that having access to internet, most of them are very active in the society as a student, as a teacher, as a business people, and people in the government and every private sectors. And this part of people, this part of population in Afghanistan have the power to affect the population's idea, the whole population. Because, for example, a student in Kabul that came from provinces, he or she came back, go back to their home and their provinces. And they also took these ideas with themselves to their families and their community. And it's not just about the people that are online in Afghanistan. It's also about the people that are in contact or are in relationship with people that are online. You get my idea?
Yes, and that's encouraging.
Yes, exactly. Because most of the people having access to internet in Afghanistan are not ordinary people. They are educated. They are working. They are in the position to making decision, and it's very important because we had I said to some of other people from other countries that I said there's lots of parliament member and politicians that are coming. They came to Facebook and they made a profile and they are getting involved in this kind of conversation, and it's very important that they hearing that young generation or some people think differently, and they think about that maybe this idea is right, and I think it's a spread it's a spread the idea.
That's good. Okay, well, we're running out of time, but I wanted to ask you a little about the Afghan Cultural House, which you are the general director of. What does that do?
Afghan Cultural House idea came to my mind and some of my friends in 2003, and we started establishing that because in Afghanistan totally, and actually in Kabul, we had absence of a place that people, actually young generation, gathering together, talking, using the internet, reading books, and print media there. And we established Afghan Cultural House with help of U.S. Embassy in Kabul. And in this center we have library, cafe, gallery, and training center. And people, most of them young generation, men and women, come there using the internet. They have access to free internet in Afghan Cultural House, and also they can have access to print media there. And also it's a suitable place to visiting friend or gathering for talk and or studying. We had lots of students that they came to Afghan Cultural House and using the library for studying. And it was the first, I think, this kind of centers in Afghanistan. Afghan Cultural House was the first But we hope, lots of people, young people from other provinces that came to Kabul, and they expected me to open another cultural center there, but our sources is limited, and we hope we can do that in the future.
If you had more resources, could you start something like the Afghan Cultural House in other towns?
I think it's very necessary for all cities and provinces in Afghanistan, because people haven't, the public places like parks, cinemas, and cafes in Afghanistan is not, it's very limited, and the price that they have to pay for the services there is very high. And I think it's very, very necessary for young generation to have a space to express themselves, seeing friends, reading, working on the internet. It's very necessary. We, our group that working in Afghan Cultural House, we are very, 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 very eager to have another places, to establish another places in other provinces, and give that place to young generation to manage that, using that, and as a place to express their ideas and communicate and talk, and having activities there.
Okay. Well, I hope you do find the resources to spread the model to other parts of Afghanistan. It sounds like a very valuable thing, and especially in light of what we were just saying about the role of civil society and of new media in spreading awareness of the way things work in the rest of the world, and also the possible role of those things in making it harder for the Taliban should they try to take over Kabul.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much for hearing me and getting our voice to the rest of the world. I'm really happy to do this interview.
So am I. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Goodbye.
Goodbye.